Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to go ahead and get started. First off, and she just sat down, she's going to have to get right back up, Susan Rosas, the CEO of YWCA Kalamazoo.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Susan Rosas, and I have the honor of serving as YWCA Kalamazoo CEO. At YWCA, our mission is to eliminate racism and empower women and promote peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. Just over 1 year ago, we gathered for a press conference in this very room to discuss funding cuts and legislative shifts that we knew would hurt our communities. We predicted a rise in violence because we know that violence increases when political vitriol and economic uncertainty rise. We know that violence increases when services decrease. This last year has created the optimal opportunity for violence, and we are now seeing the outcomes that no one hoped would come true. The terrible harm to come that we predicted 1 year ago is already here. While we will be discussing several worrying data points today, I wish to draw your attention in particular to strangulation data. Strangulation is the greatest predictor we have of homicide in the domestic violence realm. If your partner has strangled you in the past, your risk of being killed by them is 10 times higher. And if the abuse itself does not become fatal, the injury after strangulation can cause lasting outcomes and early death. In the last year alone, strangulation rates have increased nearly threefold when compared to 2024. YWCA sees it among the survivors we are serving. Bronson's emergency room sees the same, with a 167% increase in strangulations treated in their emergency room when you compare 2024 to 2025. When we see more survivors experience strangulation, we will continue to see rising domestic violence homicide. Pregnant women are in particular danger. Although pregnant women represent less than 2% of all women, they represent more than 10% of those who experience strangulation, after which they see a 900% increase in risk for homicide. Homicide is currently the leading cause of maternal mortality in our country. Not hypertension, not pregnancy complications, homicide. This is a public health and a public safety crisis. I'm joined here today by some of our community partners here in Kalamazoo, alongside our sister organization in Grand Rapids, because the alarming data we are witnessing locally mirrors the alarming data rising in communities across our country. Together, we hope to convey 3 important points today. 1, the severity of violence we are witnessing is a public health and public safety crisis, and we are all duty-bound to act. 2, victims and survivors who are experiencing violence are not alone. There is help here for you 24/7, and though we are seeing this violence escalate, there is help. Your life is precious. And 3, the Michigan draft budget currently plans to cut victim services statewide by 25% this year, just as we are seeing rapidly escalating violence and loss of life. State appropriations to the Crime Victims' Rights Sustaining Fund must be $45 million higher to keep services online statewide. Our legislators have both the power and the responsibility to protect their communities. And with that, I will pass to Hannah.
Thank you, Susan. Next up, we have Chief David Boysen from Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety.
Well, good morning. After some depressing data here, I'll try to, touch a couple positive things here. But as law enforcement, we recognized a long time ago that a lot of domestic violence cases were slipping through the cracks. For instance, we could get a call today about a domestic violence situation. I'd send an officer, and they could either arrest because there's probable cause, or maybe submit a case to the prosecutor's office. But we could come back to that same house a week later, a month later, 2 months later, and every time that we go to that house, usually a different officer goes and writes a report. So we recognize that a lot of cases were slipping through the cracks. We also know that a lot of domestic violence cases go unreported or underreported. So we know one of the big things that we need is proper interventions to help break that cycle of violence. So proper interventions through the support services the YWCA provides is critical to helping prevent some tragic outcomes, and we've seen a lot of tragic outcomes over the years. So about 6 years ago, we recognized that at the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety, and we started our high-risk domestic violence response team in partnership with the YWCA. And Sherry Brockway is here, and she was a big part of that at the beginning. I can't believe it was that long ago now. But since then, we do a lot better job of connecting those dots and filling in those gaps so cases aren't slipping through the cracks. Since then, every single domestic violence call that we get, the lieutenant assigned to the high-risk domestic violence team reviews that and looks for certain lethality factors so we can engage the services of the YWCA much more quickly than we did in the past. Because as law enforcement officers, we are the ones that get called to those homes. We're the ones that go behind those closed doors and see a lot of the incidents that are happening, talking to the victims, talking to the witnesses, talking to the suspects. And so we're a great partner in that to ensure that we work closely with the YWCA to make sure that we are engaging those resources, the advocacy and support necessary to get better outcomes in some of these domestic violence cases. Is what I really want the community to know is that when you call the police to report a domestic violence incident, you're not just getting us. We're going to bring along all the services that the YWCA offers to help provide that support and services that our victims need. And because a lot of times it's ongoing support and it's very intensive, and we make sure that they get that support. Since we started this high-risk domestic violence team, on average, we have about 137 referrals to the YWCA per year. And so far, just this year in 2026, we've had over 50 referrals through the high-risk domestic violence response team. I'm also really pleased that of the referrals that we had last year, I think last year we had about 142 referrals through the high-risk DV team. Over 85% of those victims took the services of the YWCA and sought help. And that's huge. So I think that warm handoff between us and the YWCA is facilitating a lot more people getting the help that they need. Because our goal is not just to make an arrest, write a report, and move on. Our goal is really to help those victims to make sure that we can break that cycle of violence that keeps continuing year after year before it escalates. So there's really no doubt that this partnership that we have with the YWCA has improved outcomes on domestic violence cases and has saved lives. And I just personally am very impressed with the care and compassion and the dedication of all the staff at the YWCA. They really do an excellent job and really do an amazing job supporting our victims. And as public safety, we are very grateful to be their partner, and I'm very grateful for all the great work that they do in our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief Boysen. Next, I would like to introduce Jeff Getting, Kalamazoo County Prosecuting Attorney, and Holly Thompson, the Assistant Prosecuting Attorney for the Special Victims Team.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. About a week ago, the Y contacted my office, contacted me and said, we're going to do this media event because we want to bring to the public's attention what we're seeing, which is an uptick in the severity of domestic violence incidents and an uptick in the number of survivors that are seeking our services. And it's really important that that uptick in the number of cases, the uptick in the severity of the cases, be brought to all the public's attention. It's also really important to say that this isn't a Kalamazoo problem. This isn't unique to our county or our city. This isn't even unique to Michigan. This is something that we're seeing across our state. We're seeing it across our country. And so I thought, well, is what they're seeing what we're seeing in my office? And so I looked, and here's the numbers of it all. When we talk about data points, I think that when we compare, is it true that we're actually seeing this uptick in violence? So let's compare the first quarter of 2025 with the first quarter of 2026. In 2025, my office authorized 212 domestic violence misdemeanor cases, another 33 felony cases in the first quarter. This year, We authorized 244 misdemeanors and 35 felonies. That's a 14% increase over last year's numbers in all domestic violence cases. In misdemeanor domestic violence first cases, people's first encounter with the system, their first time they're being charged, 177 cases in the first quarter of 2025, 220 in the first quarter of 2026, a 24% increase. When we talk about the most serious cases, aggravated domestic violence cases where a serious injury has resulted, 5 times the number of aggravated domestic violence cases in 2026 over 2025. And as Susan mentioned, one of the most significant lethality factors, assault by strangulation cases, 17 in the first quarter of 2025, 22 in the first quarter of 2026, a 29% increase over last year. What the Y is seeing, what other social service agencies are seeing, we can talk about anecdotally, but what they're seeing isn't just their feelings. This is real. These are real people who are in violent relationships. And we need to do everything we can in order to be able to help those survivors. This is a great opportunity for me to say, we need to encourage people in violent relationships to come forward. There are people in my office, like Assistant Prosecutor Holly Thompson, like our Victim Advocate Supervisor, Rhonda Baxter-Todd, who's here with us, that are there to help. Law enforcement, prosecutor's office, the YWCA, other social service organizations. We are all here to help people who are survivors. As Susan mentioned, this also is a critical moment for our ability to continue providing services. Every 5 years, the federal funding for the Violence Against Women Act is up for renewal. That's up now for renewal in this next budget process. Guess what? The feds intend to cut spending. The Victims of Crime Act, VOCA funding. Proposals are to reduce that funding. This is funding that provides for services at the Y, but it's also funding that provides for services in my office. Our victim advocates are funded by this money. We have seen year after year, reduction after reduction in funding for social services, and what we are seeing now is the result of that. It is in part due to our inability to provide the services that we need to in order to provide help for those survivors' families, the children that are playing outside on the playground now today. We need to make sure that we face this critical moment and encourage those policymakers, those legislative persons, both at the state and federal level to, I get it. We all have to have priorities in the way we budget and spend, but this isn't a place to cut. Find someplace else. Lastly, I've got Assistant Prosecuting Attorney Holly Thompson with me here. As you heard, she's one of our Special Victims Unit prosecutors. Holly's job, she's one of 3 prosecutors in my office because we have to have 3 prosecutors in my office to do child abuse, sexual assault cases, the assault by strangulation cases, the felony domestic violence cases that come from it. Holly's one of those attorneys that does this, and I've asked her to be here so she can talk for a minute about how her and Rhonda and the other victim advocates approach these kinds of cases in our office with the victims in mind and how we try to put victims first. Holly?
So historically, our criminal justice system has treated victims, and I'm using victims because that's the legal term, has treated victims like cogs in the criminal justice system and in other systems as well, rather than as people with rights, as people with entitlement to protections, as people with entitlement to treatment with respect and dignity. And what we're hoping to do is start to shift that, and I think we are working on that. We're looking at what it means to be victim-centered. It does not mean to be victim-dependent. Instead of putting the onus completely on the victim to do their own investigation, to organize their own meetings, instead, we're trying to make sure that we're checking in with the victim, with the survivor, making sure that they know us, that they can touch base with us. We have victim advocates that are doing a very crucial role in referring them to services like the YWCA. It is exceedingly more likely that a survivor will stay away after they leave a domestic violence situation and stay more safe if they have access to a supportive community and supportive resources. So we are referring them to resources. We are also making sure that they get to set the tone for meetings, whether that's in person or over the phone, over Zoom. And then we're also working with law enforcement to make sure that investigators are following up with victims. The community can also help by being educated on the myths about domestic violence, changing their perceptions and not victim blaming, but instead recognizing the incredibly difficult situation that people find themselves in when they are in a domestic violence situation. Another thing that our office does is make sure that we are looking at each case in a case-specific manner to determine the appropriate outcome in a case. Sometimes that looks like restraint, and sometimes that looks like treatment on probation. What is very interesting is that our office has a policy where we do not recommend anger management in those cases, but instead domestic violence specific classes, because statistics show that anger management is not effective in domestic violence situations. It's not about anger, it's actually about power and control. And so we are doing that as well. And so I just want to encourage survivors, if you're in this situation, if you're currently living through this situation, if you have lived through this situation, reach out to your community, reach out for medical resources, legal resources, law enforcement support, to the YWCA. There are people willing to help who want to help. You're worth protecting. Your children are worth being safe. Advocate for yourself. Know you're worth it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jeff and Holly. Next, we have Dr. Nakia Belcher, the Vice President of Crisis Services and Community Outreach at YWCA West Central Michigan.
Good morning. My name is Dr. Nikki Belcher. I am the Vice President of Crisis Services and Community Programs in Grand Rapids. Our service area includes Kent County and surrounding areas. While much of the data today discussed here has been about Kalamazoo, it is not unique only to Kalamazoo. Grand Rapids is experiencing the same trends. In Grand Rapids, we are also seeing survivors experience strangulation at an alarming rate. Domestic violence homicides are on the rise, with 5 domestic violence homicides that occurred in 2026 this year, the first 2 months of the year. And last year, the YWCA alone has seen a 32% increase in the number of people seeking forensic examination after an assault. At the YWCA Central Michigan, our mission is to eliminate racism and empower women. We offer a full array of services, ensuring survivors who come through our doors are met where they're at, and that we are providing the services that they need. We offer 24/7 emergency shelter, sexual assault forensic exams, legal support, advocacy, housing, and counseling. With us, survivors decide their own path. It is our greatest mission to ensure survivors of all identities find safety with us, survivors being of gender non-conforming survivors, survivors of immigration status. We are all inclusive. Like our sister organization here in Kalamazoo and beyond, we too are eager to ensure victims and survivors can reach the help they need when needed. Programs like ours are not just nice, they are essential, life-saving protections. Every single person watching this video knows someone who is experiencing or has experienced intimate partner violence. If you are experiencing violence, you are not alone, and we are here to help you. If you are a survivor in Grand Rapids area, we really want to help you. Our doors are open, and you can reach us 24/7 at 616-454-9922. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Belcher. And next we have Jessica Glynn. She's the Vice President of Victim Services here at YWCA Kalamazoo.
Good morning. I'm Jessica Glynn, Vice President of Victim Services at YWCA Kalamazoo. Thank you for being here today. At YWCA Kalamazoo, we closely track data from survivors who contact our 24/7 crisis line. This helps ensure our services and programs continue to meet the evolving needs of those reaching out for help. When we identify emerging trends, like we have discussed today, we adjust our response accordingly. What we and victim services agencies across the country are now hearing from survivors signals a growing criminal justice and public health crisis. In Kalamazoo, we are seeing in our data a 137% increase in residents experiencing homelessness as a result of domestic violence. We are seeing a 31% increase in survivors reporting severe injuries requiring hospitalization due to domestic violence. And most alarmingly, a 215% increase in survivors reporting strangulation by an intimate partner in the first quarter of this year. It bears repeating. This trend is especially concerning because strangulation is one of the strongest predictors of future homicide. Research shows that survivors who have experienced non-fatal strangulation are more than 10 times more likely to be killed by their partner than those who have not. Strangulation is also more common than people realize. In forensic and emergency medical settings, up to 38% of domestic violence survivors report being strangled, and nearly all of those cases are associated with a high risk of lethality. This is not an isolated act of violence. It is a clear escalation and one of the most significant warning signs of potential lethal harm. Strangulation deprives the brain of oxygen. Even when a survivor appears physically uninjured, they may be experiencing internal trauma, such as brain injury, stroke, delayed complications that can emerge days or even weeks later. Survivors may experience difficulty breathing, voice changes, dizziness, memory loss, and other neurological symptoms. It is possible for a survivor to show no outward symptoms and still die weeks later due to oxygen deprivation and internal injury. Research also shows that strangulation-related brain injuries are frequently missed and can lead to long-term cognitive impairment, particularly when survivors do not receive immediate medical evaluation. This risk is compounded for Black survivors of domestic violence, whose injuries are more likely to go undetected or untreated. Strangulation often leaves no visible marks, and is widely recognized as the most underreported form of violence precisely because external injuries can be minimal or absent, even in severe cases. For Black survivors, this invisibility is intensified. Clinical indicators such as bruising or redness may be more difficult to detect on darker skin tones when providers are not trained in equitable assessment practices. At the same time, systemic inequities, including implicit bias in healthcare, disparities in access to care, and long-standing mistrust of medical and legal systems can delay or prevent survivors from seeking care. These intersecting barriers increase the likelihood that life-threatening injuries go unrecognized, undocumented, and untreated. This is why immediate specialized medical attention is critical. Survivors of strangulation require comprehensive forensic medical exams by trained professionals, as well as ongoing follow-up care to monitor delayed and potentially fatal complications. The risk does not end when the assault ends. What this data demonstrates, what survivors are telling us, is that we have much more work to do. We must increase public awareness of this crime so that survivors who have been strangled by an intimate partner are able to access the urgent help they need from practitioners equipped to respond. The criminal justice system must have the tools to effectively prosecute these cases when survivors come forward through forensic nurse exams, similar to what is provided in sexual assault nurse examinations, and exactly what YWCA Central Michigan has, and we desperately need here in Kalamazoo. And critically, we must ensure that life-saving services at YWCA Kalamazoo and similar agencies across the country have the funding necessary to promote community education, forensic nurse exams, skilled advocacy, coordinated medical care, and support for survivors to exercise their legal rights. We must ensure that when survivors call our 24-hour crisis line, there's an advocate ready to answer when they are ready, when they need us most. Survivors, when you call us, you will speak to a trained advocate whose primary focus is helping you find the safety you wish to find. This could mean contacting law enforcement if you choose. It could mean seeking medical attention if you choose. It could mean coming into our secure shelter if you choose. You make the choice. At YWCA Kalamazoo, we offer emergency shelter and housing programs, in-house legal services provided and supervised by licensed attorneys, therapeutic care, on-site sexual assault nurse examinations, and advocacy services. We also offer maternal and child health programs and child care. We will never ask your immigration status. We will tailor the support we provide you, honoring your identity and adapting the needs to your family, including if you have children. Like our Grand Rapids sister organization, we have supported survivors for decades. Your safety and healing are our highest charge. If you are experiencing violence, we are here to welcome your call. Our 24-hour crisis line is 269-385-3587.
Thank you, Jessica. And I would like to welcome back up Susan Rosas to close us out today. Thanks.
This is urgent. Within the next few weeks, Michigan's legislators will be making decisions about how they will appropriate funds to victim service agencies across the state. As the budget is currently drafted, victim service funding across the state, including for our partners here, will reduce by 25% this October. A 25% reduction in services at a time that strangulation and homicides are spiking. Many organizations across the state will fold with such a cut. And all victim service providers, Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, and everywhere else, will be woefully under-resourced to respond to this rising crisis. But the budget is not yet final, and our legislators can still choose to act. Our legislators can choose to protect their communities, to do everything in their power to protect their own neighbors' lives. Michigan needs our state legislators to use their power to protect survivors from violent deaths. To protect our communities, Michigan legislators need to increase the budgeted appropriation to the statewide Crime Victims' Rights Sustaining Fund by $45 million to keep programs open. Not to expand current programs to meet the demands of these rising strangulations and homicides, but just to keep programs open. Survivors are not an expendable line item, and victims' violent deaths are preventable. No matter where you are in Michigan, call your representatives today and let them know to increase the the Crime Victims' Rights Sustaining Fund by $45 million. The next few weeks will determine whether our legislature will uphold their responsibility to protect Michigan's communities. If you are a survivor, your life is precious. If someone is hurting you, there is help here 24/7, and we will welcome your call in the Kalamazoo area at 269-385-3587. We will never ask your immigration status. We will honor all that makes you, you, your race, your gender, your background, your story. No one deserves to experience abuse of any kind for any reason. You deserve peace, justice, freedom, and dignity. And with that, I will invite any questions from our attendees. Hearing none, thank you.